The Habit of Perfection. The title of this poem, the word habit, obviously can have two meanings. It can mean a religious garment, which it does in this case indirectly, and also a settled disposition to act in a certain or a particular way. He has the habit of doing this. So in this, we have both. Hopkins wants us to develop a habit. Well, at least he wants himself to develop a habit. And that would be a style of life, a way of living, all right, a habit. And that would lead to perfection. So that's what the poem is about. I'll read it through, and then I'll make a couple comments, and then we'll go through the analysis. Elected silence, sing to me, and beat upon my world ear. Pipe me to pastures still, and be the music that I care to hear. Shape nothing, lips, be lovely dumb. It is the shut, the curfew sent from there where all surrenders come, which only makes you eloquent. Be shelled, eyes, with double dark, and find the uncreated light. This ruck and reel, which you remark, coils, keeps, and teases simple sight. Palate, the hutch of tasty lust, desire not to be rinsed with wine. This can must be so sweet, the crust so fresh, that comes and fasts divine. Nostrils, your careless that spend upon the stir and keep a pride, what relish shall the senses send along the sanctuary side? O feel the primrose hands, O feet that want the yield of plushy sward, but you shall walk the golden street, and you unhoused and house the Lord. And Pave, be thou the bride, and now the marriage feast begun, and lily-covered clothes provide your spouse not labored at nor spun. All right, I think I made a mistake up here with unhouse. I'm going to get rid of unhouse. That should not be past tense. That should be just unhouse. Okay. And you unhouse and house the Lord. All right. So I'm sure it's a bit confusing. Some parts come through clearly, others don't, which is normal for Hopkins. But you probably did notice that each stanza deals with a different sense, the senses, and he talks about each one. So it is almost like a manual to gaining perfection, all right, how to achieve perfection. And he's more or less saying, this is how it's done. It's a guide, all right? That's basically what it is. And he says, elected silence, something you choose. It's not forced on you. You choose it. Sing to me, personified silence. Elected silence, sing to me, and beat upon my world ear. That world is like shell-shaped. It's curved. The ear is curved. And he says, pipe me to pastures still, and be the music that I care to hear. So that first stanza isn't too difficult. He says he's seeking to find a quiet, just quietude, to live silently and shut out the sounds of the material world in that first one, okay? So that's what his first stanza is asking. Elected silence, sing to me and beat upon my world ear. Pipe me to pastures, take me away, all right? The music can bring you to another peaceful zone, not where you are. And those pastures are still and quiet. That's the meaning of still. And be the music that I care to hear. All right, so that stanza isn't too difficult. Shape nothing, lips be lovely dumb. In other words, that line simply says, he's bringing upon himself a silence of speech. So he's like making himself adhere to a rule of not talking, all right? Shape nothing, lips, all right? So he's addressing lips there, all right? Comma, lips, that's a direct address. And actually, for that reason, lips should be personified, and that is a capital L. Okay, I was going to say that should be a capital L. And then he says, be lovely dumb. All right, now dumb doesn't mean ignorant. It simply means, silent, don't talk. It is the shut, the curfew sent. Now, a curfew is like an ordinance that is imposed upon the residents of an area. And he's imposing upon himself an ordinance of silence in his speech. Shape nothing lips then, be lovely dumb. It is the shut, the silent, the curfew sent. And then where is that from? From there where all surrenders come. We surrender ourselves to God. All right, so he's asking God to send that curfew upon himself, which only makes you eloquent, and like not in your vocal speech, but perhaps in your speech with God, being able to communicate with God. Be shelled. So again, covering your eyes would be shelling them in double darkness. All right, so you'd put your hands over your eyes, and you have your lids covering them, and then your hands as well, so double darkness. And find the uncreated light. And that, of course, would be God. God created all things, and he didn't create himself. God always was, and always will be. In other words, he's eternal existence. There's no beginning or end to God. So uncreated light, find that in the darkness. This ruck and reel, that would be, he's referring to everything around us that distracts us, okay? And it coils, keeps, and teases simple sight. So it detracts us from our true purpose in life, all of the things. And I'll get into that in my analysis. I refer to things like iPhones and iPods and iPads and movies and everything. That's the ruck and reel of life, which draws us away, okay, from our intended purpose. Now he goes back to the senses again. The palate, the sense of taste. The hutch, that would be, a hutch is in a kitchen, all right? So some place where it is, where it reposes, the hutch of lust, of tasty lust. Hard line to say. Palate, the hutch of tasty lust. And here he is imposing a new thing upon himself. Desire not to be rinsed with wine. So he is refraining from partaking of the pleasures of life, of the senses. In that regard, he's somewhat ascetic. All right, that's a sign of asceticism. When you impose all of these restraints upon oneself, all right, as almost like punishments for others' sins, offering it up for the sins of those who are in purgatory or something, So, desire not to be rinsed with wine. And then this word can, that's in poetry, synecdoche and mononymy. Mononymy means that the object stands for something else. In this case, it stands for the water contained in the can. All right, this can must be so sweet, and the crust stands for bread, so fresh that comes and fasts the vine. It's a confusing sentence. When one is on a fast and eating nothing all day, except, let's say, 3 times in the course of the day, he has a taste of water and a crust of bread. He said that must be so sweet, sweet the bread, the crust, and sweet the water, the can, so fresh that comes and fasts the vine. All right, so when you impose yourself upon yourself a fast, then the things that you do partake of gain merit in your eyes or taste. All right, and then the next sense, nostrils, smell. You're careless that spend upon the stare and keep of pride. What relish shall the senses send? Now, senses are like in a church you put the incense in that, and then swing the censer, and it sends out the smell of the charcoal of the incense you're burning on the charcoal. So here he's restricting himself again by disciplining himself, and it's in this stanza and also in the next. You see what I mean here. O feel of primrose hands, O feet that want the yield of plushy sward, but you shall walk the golden street, and you unhouse and house the Lord. So here he's saying is that I need to discipline my my hands, my feet, my my smell, in a sense. Like, don't be swayed away by aroma of food, for instance, or of perfumes of flowers, and drags me away into the material world to engage in that beauty. So it's really highly ascetic. I mean, at an extreme. So, O feel of primrose hands. Okay, everyone loves flowers, and to hold them. All right, so primrose is a small little yellow flowers that bloom in the spring. And he says, "O feet that want the yield of plushy sward." That would be, grass, really plush, warm, lawn. Okay, and you shall walk the golden street, and you will house the Lord. So by contrast, you have better things awaiting you upon your ordination. You shall walk the golden street. In other words, living the life of a cleric, of a priest. And you will take the host out of the tabernacle for communion and return it, house the Lord within his tabernacle. And that will be, what I will be doing as a priest. And then he refers to, at the end, as I said in the beginning, that he ends with reference to poverty, chastity, and obedience, the vows that he will take when he becomes a priest. Poverty, be thou the bride, and the marriage feast begun, because, he's married to the church. And lily-covered clothes provide. So that's a reference to the lilies of the field, in Matthew 8, when he refers to even Solomon in all his glory wasn't clothed like the lilies are, right? So he's referring to that. Lily-covered clothes provide. Your spouse not labored at, nor spun. In other words, the clothing is provided by the Lord, all right, not labored at by people. All right, so here's the analysis. Hopkins composed this poem shortly before he was ordained into the priesthood. Basically, it's a treatise on how to gain perfection in the spiritual life by offering steps on complete renunciation of each of those senses which might lead to sensual distraction and materialistic pleasure. Instead of being a guide to developing habits of living a spiritual life, though, I think it's really more of a guide to living a life of complete asceticism. It's a complete and extreme surrender of all the human faculties to achieving the spiritual perfection. So maybe for Hopkins, who was a Jesuit, and following the discipline of Saint Loyola, Ignatius Loyola, he could do these things, but I think the average person would have a hard time doing this. With occasional use of imagery, Hopkins treats each sensory faculty in successive stanzas, concluding with his comments on the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and the joys associated with living that kind of life, talking about walking the golden streets, and complete trust in God for everything, the sustenance, his clothing, by taking the vow of chastity and poverty, and being entirely obedient to the way of life in the Jesuits. The poem consists of 7 quatrains, that means 4 lines, with the rhyming scheme A-B, A-B, all the way through. And something unusual for him, because iambic pentameter and iambic tetrameter, that would be 4 beats instead of 5, are styles that most other poets use, but not Hopkins. Hopkins, he's innovative with all of the things that he created himself in his poetry. So this is somewhat uncommon for him to write a poem in the style, which is the normal style, which is kind of strange. All right, so stanza 1 begins with the sense of hearing. He wishes to close himself into the sounds from the sounds of the material world, and hear only the eternal, the sounds of the material world, and hear only the internal music of silence, which he says can transport him away from the material world with all its cacophony. He uses personification. Using it, he conjures the pastoral imagery when addressing silence, and he asks to be carried to the pastures still. He asks that the music be beaten upon his spiral-shaped ear. In the second stanza, he wishes to surrender his faculty of speech, personifying his lips and words, be lovely dumb, Using the word curfew, he suggested an outside rule of ordinance be imposed upon the inhabitants. In this case, one of silence on him. He's the inhabitant. He's placing a self-imposition on his own speech and hearing. The place of the curfew's origin is from God, where all surrenders come, which only makes you eloquent. Okay, so in communicating with God. Stanza 3 addresses the faculty of sight. Here he intimates that this sense is the one responsible for most distractions in life, drawing our attention from our true purpose, which is a close relationship with God. What he calls ruck and reel might be in today's world such distractions as I said, the iPhone, the tablet, the computers, the television, the radio, all of these things that we go to, all right? His words, be shelled eyes, suggest a double darkness, as I said before, so that he can find the uncreated light, which is God. The ruck and reel teases simple sight, or simply is a distraction, means a distraction. Stanza 4 is extreme in its advocacy. It's a plea for life of asceticism, completely abstemious, not eating anything but bread and drinking water. Not only does he advocate refraining from tasty food and drink, but he suggests that plain bread and water will be sweet to the palate after a strict fast. He uses the word can as a poetic device of mononymy, for the container refers to its content, in this case water. Hence he's saying that a diet of water and bread crust will lead to a closer relationship with God. Stanzas 5 and 6 address the importance of developing a discipline to avoid the temptations of the pleasurable senses. He cites his faculty of smell, which might tempt him with the fragrance and sweet smell of food, as well as that of his feet moving himself into places of temptation. These faculties require a strict governance, discipline. He says it is a human proclivity to prefer a plush lawn or grass and a scene of beautiful flowers, such as primroses, to other impoverished things, right? Areas that you wouldn't normally want to go to. But having chosen an ascetic life of penance and self-restraint, he reminds himself that better things will await him upon his ordination. He describes this vision in these words: you shall walk the golden street, within the churches and following Christ. And you shall unhouse and house the Lord. Here he means he will one day bring the Blessed Sacrament out of the tabernacle and then replace it after communion. In the final stanza, he speaks of his coming vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. In regards to the first, poverty, he speaks of not worrying about his clothing, his attire. And he says, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed as one of these. And then finally, the reference to chastity, be thou the bride, and now the marriage feast begun, is an allusion to his vow of chastity, and perhaps a reference to his own marriage to the church, okay? Especially for the nuns, because, that's, in fact, I once went to a convent up in, what was it, in Newfoundland, and it was called St. Bride's, and it was like the nuns were brides of Christ, So that's the meaning of that at the end. All right, with that, I'll go back and read it one more time. Elected silence, sing to me and beat upon my world ear. Pipe me to pastures still, and be the music that I care to hear. Shape nothing, lips, be lovely dumb. It is the shut, the curfew sent from there where all surrenders come, which only makes you eloquent. Be shelled, eyes, with double dark, and find the uncreated light. This ruck and reel which you remark coils, keeps, and teases simple sight. Palate, the hutch of tasty lust, desire not to be rinsed with wine. This can must be so sweet, the crust so fresh, that comes in fasts divine. Nostrils, your careless that spend upon the stair and keep a pride, what relish shall the senses send along the sanctuary side? That's an exclamation. Oh, how wonderful that will be. What relish, you enjoy it, shall the senses send along the sanctuary side. Oh, feel of primrose hands, oh, feet that want to yield a plushy sward. But you shall walk the golden street, and you unhouse and house the Lord. And poverty, be thou the bride, and now the marriage feast begun, and lily-colored clothes provide, your spouse not labored at nor spun. Okay, so